Welcome, everybody. I'm Tom Anderson, and this is Webinar on Wednesday with Destinations Together. As always, a warm welcome to our Zoom listeners and cruise line executives that are tuning in. The news has been active this week, especially in the cruise tourism sector. Here are a few pertinent stories of the week. As the U.S. reopens, new COVID cases continue to increase, with record-breaking 3 million cases in the United States and 11.8 million worldwide. Royal Caribbean and NCL have partnered together on health protocols. They've hired Governor Mike Leavitt and Dr. Scott Gottlieb to serve as co-chairs of the newly formed group of experts called the Healthy Sail Panel. MSC announced a Blue Ribbon COVID expert group to help the line navigate its return to service. Meanwhile, the World Travel and Tourism Council, WTTC, and Carnival Corp will host the Global Science Summit on COVID-19 scheduled for July 23rd. These initiatives are encouraging, but a question remains. We all agree that health and safety of passengers and crew is not a competitive issue. So why not work as one cruise industry group? Nevertheless, there is real effort being made to get cruise tourism reset and restarted. Likewise, if you are not already engaged, now is the time to seriously review your business and your brand. Today's topic addresses this head on. You will be challenged to take a fresh look at your brand, reimagine the guest experience you are delivering, and to recreate the story of your brand to deliver the best possible destination performance. I am totally confident that you will think differently about your business and your destination as a result of today's webinar. Today's presentation is hosted by Destinations Together, which is an open platform of relevant information and collaboration to support the tourism industry. It is designed to help everyone connect, collaborate, and hopefully find solutions to bridge the gap until cruise ships and tourism return to your region. I'll turn this over to Larry to share some important information and then introduce our speaker for today's Destinations Together webinar on Wednesday.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it. We want to thank all of you for joining us today. We also want to recognize our guest speakers from Friday, June 26th, featuring Resper Technology, who presented Disinfecting Air and Surfaces. Resper Technologies feature a line of products to safely disinfect contaminated air and hidden surfaces 24/7 and have complete family of products to fit various applications. Please check out our website for the Resper webinar and all the others we have done over the last several weeks. Before we begin, let me remind you of a few important housekeeping items. We are recording this webinar and we will upload it to the website in the next few days. There is a Q&A tab below on your screen. We look forward to getting your questions that we can pose to Bob for his feedback. We encourage you all to also vote on questions listed in the Q&A to help ensure we include the most important ones to you all. Please remember we and our guests are only providing our opinions and possible sources for further intel. We are happy to have Bob Allen, CEO and Chief Storytelling Officer of the innovative, multifaceted experience design firm called Ideas. In this relaxed and entertaining presentation, Bob will explore tips and tricks to retool and reactivate your brand, how to use the current situation as an opportunity to break free and innovate, and also the pillars of destination performance. Bob, we are so happy to have you here with us today to share your insight. On a personal note, I have worked closely with Bob and his team on multiple projects over the past several years in various Caribbean destinations. Bob is a true and innovative storyteller. He is engaging, energizing, and effortlessly bringing a story to life. Today's session will challenge you to see your destination as something beyond the typical sand, surf, and sun, and to find your destination's true identity and tell that story. Well, Bob, I need to stop talking and let you take the show away. It's all yours.
Thanks, Larry. Appreciate it. I think you say that to all the girls, but I do appreciate it. Let me just kind of grab my frames here now that everything's sorted off my screen. Well, again, thanks for having me. Appreciate being here. I'm going to go pretty quick. And to Larry's point, we really hope this will be a dialogue today. So, as you're listening, if questions pop into your head or thoughts pop into your head, please share them via comments or text. And I think that makes it much richer. And I think Larry and Tom will be happy to jump in too if they see us going in an interesting direction. So I'm going to take just a couple of seconds to frame up who we are as a company first, because I think that helps frame why we're saying what we're saying. So spent 26 years with Disney myself. A lot of our team came from Disney. We're very small, very nimble. And, you know, my role was in live entertainment, operations. I was a Disney Imagineer on 3 parks, and I also worked in marketing. So I kind of learned a round perspective about this fascinating destination entertainment business we all work in. For the last 19 years, our band of rowdies has been a small, nimble, independent company. And as I mentioned, we practice primarily in brand and experience design. We have a couple of verticals we work in, but a real strong emphasis on destination entertainment. Work we do, experience design, which is really what happens to a guest when they go somewhere in simple terms. And that could be anything from a full-on complete greenfield theme park all the way up to just tweaking the arrival experience at a port. We do brand development. If you got a great brand already, we'll help you activate it. Enculturation training is a very, very key point. And actually, and I'm going to say later, it is the #1 brand activation strategy, actually, is training. We are a content company. We have roots in media, film and television and game production. And we've been known to put together a pretty good live special event. Our clients, as mentioned, are destinations all over the world, but particularly recently in the Caribbean, parks, museums, cultural attractions, all these kinds of things. And these are just samples of things we've done recently in the business. We do work as a team. As I mentioned, we're very small. There's only 9 of us. Typically, when we're looking at a destination engagement, this is our team. So there's Larry's firm right there. Larry's our destination import consulting guru. We are very, very, very grounded in market analytics. We think getting out of the box is dangerous. We think understanding the box and then doing a fabulous job in the box creates profitability. So we work with a great firm called Integrated Insight to do all our market metrics so that our team of right-brainers can be free to be right-brained. And then from a design perspective, our design architect is a guy named David Exline working out of Irvine, California. All right, so that's us. Enough about us. We will argue, for at least for today, and there may be others, but we will argue these 6 things are the definition of what we call destination performance. As long as you have strong and growing attendance and you can increase your guest length of stay, give them a reason to spend more, give you more share of wallet for each visit, report that they are well satisfied and you've exceeded their expectation, shorten their return cycle so they come back more frequently and recommend you to their friends and family. If we're hitting those 6 things as a destination, we're going to argue your destination, your attraction, wherever you're working is performing well. So we call that destination performance. I think the question for today is, how do you do that in a post-pandemic environment? How do we take advantage actually of this market inflection that's happened and prepare to come back to life even stronger? And the fundamental big picture answer is this: we need to make sure that everybody is in love with your story. I'm going to wear you out a little bit with the word story today. We are above all a storytelling organization. And as you'll see in a moment, we're going to propose that narrative and story, particularly with reference to destinations, is the key design criteria for making it work. So welcome to World 5.0. I called it World 5.0 because, we already had the first 3 worlds. I'm sure somebody else had 4, so let's call it 5. I want to propose 5 things that I'm going to argue, at least for the moment, and maybe if you'll bear with me, agree to accept these 5 things as true just for the next 20 or 30 minutes. So thing number 1, there's no such thing as a return to normal. We're never going back as a planet. Consumers are never going back. Guests are never going back. The world is never going back to how it was before this pandemic. And if you think about it, it's pretty normal, right? I mean, it didn't go back to how it was after World War II either. Things changed. Second, I hate the term new normal. The reason is it implies that there's this desirable steady state called normal. My argument is that that's never existed. Here's what I think is true. There's always going to be a next normal. And that's what we're going to talk about right now is, all right, it's going to keep moving. What's it look like next? And if we can get ahead of that next and then maybe build some resiliency in our organizations to stay ahead of the next as we go forward, that's good news. I would argue that the current market reset, this inflection point we're in, is an opportunity. Yeah, it hurts. I get it. Nobody's making money right now. People aren't traveling, but it is a reset opportunity to do some things that might really prepare us to really go out into the next normal and make some great opportunities come to life. So I'm going to argue that there are 3 primary points of leverage in that reset opportunity, and those are the 3 things I want to spend time talking about. So the first are your guests. Now, I had a very weak and a very short career as a musician, but I will tell you, when you're a guitar player, if you play your light jazz set in a bar full of cowboys, it's going to be a really long night. So our first lever is you really want to look at your guests. You want to understand them. And the pro tip on guests right now that we're finding out in our research with our clients is going forward next, they may not be exactly who you think they are. So as an example, we're doing some really fun work on a great project in San Juan, Puerto Rico. And we just got some market information back. The pie chart on the right is an interesting distribution. So this happens to be an extraordinarily well-balanced Caribbean destination. I understand not everybody's pie chart would look the same, but here's the point. The industry, the destination industry, and I'm going to be a little Caribbean centric in my discussion, primarily because that's where we've had the most experience. So cruise volume has really fueled this decade of extraordinary growth in Caribbean destinations particularly. And the good news on that is they're going to be back. You guys all monitor, I'm sure, the future booking pace. But what we don't know is when they're going to start sailing again. And our indications are the cruise industry as a delivery mechanism is going to lag the rest of the economies. Now, here's the good news. You got these 2 other colors. So right now in the next normal, we want you to begin to think a little more about, what about those fly-in guests? What about those resident guests? How do we use that platform to rebuild our business? Excuse me. So here's kind of a snapshot of what we think next might look like relative to guests. Number 1, there is an extraordinary market opportunity in pent-up demand. I don't know about you, I'm real tired of staring out in my backyard, and I think that goes for lots of people. We see Walt Disney World reopening in a few days, and part of their reopening safety strategy has been you have to make a reservation. The Hollywood Studios, which was my old park, sold out a couple of days in hours because people are so hungry to go. That's great news, right? That's really good news. So that's a thing that we need to think about. There's pent-up demand. As we talk further about brand, we want to feed that demand, and we even want to turn the heat up on it. Those fly-in guests, those are going to be back first. The good news about them is also they run a little more affluent, and even if they're not more affluent in terms of household income, fly-in guests typically stay longer, and they're much more willing to spend on an experience, particularly the younger they shift toward the millennial and Gen Z generations. So we want to think about that what are we doing right now? How are we looking at our product for fly-in guests? Local counts. Local and regional offerings are really good in bread and butter, and we find an awful lot of destinations simply discount local and regional attendance. We were extraordinarily surprised in a project we recently did in the Dominican Republic because we did what we usually do. Say, there aren't a lot of income qualified guests, in country. We're just going to focus on the cruise lines and on the out of country attendees. Even the research said that, but when we went and put eyeballs on the ground, what we found was that particular group of people defies the research. They will spend an inordinate amount of their time, effort, and money to go as a large family group and have a great experience. So it was a learning. So local counts in the emerging market. What untourism means is that nobody ever got up in the morning and said, "Hey, I'm a tourist. That's great. What a badge of honor." The real truth is, and again, this is more important as we shift younger in demographics, people don't want to think of themselves as a tourist. They want to think of themselves as an explorer, as an adventurer, maybe even as an honorary local, because there's some honor in that. There's some inside group feeling in that. So as we move into the next round, how do we embrace our guests and say, "Hey, you're part of the family. Well, welcome back. We got something special for you." And the last point about next, and you're probably already here, but I just want to emphasize it. Diversity really, really matters as we enter the next market. There are lots and lots and lots of market subsets. So if you are not currently absolutely focused on demonstrating that you're inviting to a diverse audience, whether that's a Black audience, whether that's an LGBTQ audience. You want to really look at that. If you're not broadcasting that message and your product doesn't feel welcoming, you really want to look at that, because honestly, to put it coldly, you're leaving money on the table. So those are kind of the next trends. Let's explore a few things you can do about that. So here's 5 things that we are actually engaged in doing out in the market with our clients. So it's a great time to start with who's coming, who are our guests? And a really good way to do that is to engage primary research. That's different than statistical research. Stat research, secondary research, stuff you can find on the internet, tourism reports, that looks backwards. Primary research looks forward. It actually goes and identifies people and say, hey, what are you going to do next? Or do you like this idea? So it really is good to know now what people are thinking. Second, yes?
The primary research typically is targeted to what types of groups? I know it's based on destination and type of company, but what's typical?
Yeah, the best way to do it in our experience is to first go out and you have to pay for this, but the research group that we work with uses panel companies, and we like to go out and say, go find us a representative sample of people who will indicate they have an interest in visiting the Caribbean in the next 12 to 24 months. We start there, and then sometimes you can even fine tune it further in terms of household income, country of origin or state of origin. So the point is to go talk to people who already are kind of interested and really find out what they think. Yeah, that's a great point. Next one, we have an argument. You have the world's greatest experts sitting right next to you. Your frontline staff, people you work with and people your partners work with, who actually touch guests, who are face-to-face with the guest, have amazing insight. And often it gets transparent, right? Put your hand here, you can still see around, you don't notice your fingers. That guest insight is extraordinarily valuable to mine. So right now is a great time to get those people in a room and say, hey, when you're out with our guests and you're doing what we do, what works? What do they tell you they love? What do they tell you they don't love? So mining that frontline intelligence about your guest is really important. Similarly, I'm going to argue every destination has people who are, Antigua files or Bahama files or, St. Thomas files. They're people who absolutely fell in love with your destination. They may come often. If you have a good CRM program, reach out to those people right now and say, hey, you love it here. What do you love? What are we doing right? That appreciative inquiry, finding out what you're doing well, is a lot, frankly, honestly, more important for experience design than the old-fashioned, rate it from 1 to 5 and tell us what you liked, what you didn't like. Go focus on what they like and do more of that. And if you don't have a robust CRM program right now in some way, you need to get one, because establishing a way to have a dialogue with your guest, as you'll see later, is super critical. Best consultants in the world are people who already like what you're doing and will tell you what they like. Ask for ideas. You can also reach out to your public, to your audience, and say, if you could have anything you wanted from us, what would you want? And the interesting thing is, if they believe you're sincere, they will tell you. We worked on a project to help a zoo, with a dinosaur exhibit. And one of the most important things was simply to say, hey, be a kid. Forget all of the analytics and all the manufacturing. Go be a kid for a minute. As a kid, what would you really love to be able to do with a dinosaur? And it opens an extraordinary door. I want to be able to have lunch with a dinosaur. I want to slide down his tail. So if you ask your audience, hey, you know us, what would you love to do if we could just give you a way to do it? They'll tell you. And finally, it's a really good time to imagine who your new friends ought to be and who to invite next, and then maybe how to invite them. Guest surveys are great. And, when we first started getting into metrics, when I was in Walt Disney World marketing, we began to do real guest satisfaction surveys, and it was very eye-opening. But somebody, and I think honestly it was like an intern, was in a meeting once. We were all going over this data, and the young person raised their hand and said, that's really good, but shouldn't we be asking the people who aren't coming why they're not coming? So a way to do that is to say, who do we think would love it here, who we don't see here? Who are they? Where are we? Where are they? And how do we get to them? So I think those are the primary things to kind of look at doing around your guest. Yep.
Just a quick one to maybe provide a few examples of, you talked about, the cast, the employees, they've got a lot of the answers. Talk to other people to get ideas. What are some of those platforms other than, a survey or a one-on-one type thing? What are platforms that you can engage people in to draw some of those thoughts and ideas out?
Yeah, good point. And we'll talk about that a little in the branding area, but the easiest one, particularly right now, are the social media platforms. So when we get to the brand piece, we'll be telling you, if you don't have one, for goodness sake, you need a robust social media activation plan, and you need to be on it every day. But engaging people right now online is the way you engage people, because that's where everybody's living. Nobody's going anywhere. There are other ways, if you've got good lists, if you do have a good CRM database, you can reach out with email blasts, and you can do clever things. You can do what we're doing today. You could easily reach out to people if you've got their contact info and say, hey, we'd like to invite you to a such and such destination, interesting little Zoom environment. And the real reason is we want to talk to you. We want to know what you think. Again, the advantage we have right now about all that is people are sitting in their house and they're getting tired of watching that same series on Netflix again. So the more you can do it live, the more you can do it in a dialogue way, I think the more powerful it is. All right, your story. Now this is religion for us. There's nothing more important than story in the world. And the pro tip on story is, identify right now, look around your destination, who are your great storytellers? And that doesn't mean necessarily the ones with the best gift to gab, although a lot of them do. You know who they are. You know in your destination. Some of them work for you and some of them don't. They're just people who are in your environment. Figure out who they are, because they're going to be really important to your emergence strategy here. All right, so talk about stories for just a second, because it's my favorite thing in the world. The argument we make is we've been telling stories since we climbed out of trees and lost our tails. In fact, stories are the way that a species of animal with no armor, no teeth, no claws, who can't run very fast, whose young take multiple years, sometimes over 30, to be able to live on their own, took over a whole planet. We did it because we uniquely have this ability to say, here's what's in my head, let me put it in your head. So stories are fundamental. They are the basics of how we evolved as human beings. In fact, the very first story ever told was actually a destination story. Big old cave guy, and he was probably a male, got up around the campfire and pantomimed the hunt. Why? Because he wanted some people to go with him, because he was tired of carrying all that meat home by himself. So destination storytelling has been around for several million years, and it still works. So the idea of experience design, this process that we like to call experience design, is it's a method, and it does have a method to it, and we'll explore that a little bit in a minute, but it's a way to engage your story from your guest out, right? You don't build from the ground up. You don't start with what assets do we have in our portfolio. You start with that guest. You build from the guest out. And the truth of that is, now we're in a dialogue. Now we've pulled our guest into our story. And I don't want to get too philosophical, but this really is fundamental to humans. Every time a guest shows up in your destination, you've offered to enter this setting. You've put yourselves on a stage with them, and you've said, okay, we're going to act out a myth together. And a myth is not a lie or something that's untrue. A myth is a kind of story that deals with, how does my reality work? And it's very satisfying to people. And that's really what you're doing in your destination work. So it's exciting. It really is exciting to start with this story approach. So we actually have developed a methodology that uses narrative as a design system. So here's the simple-minded way we think about it. You always start with a problem statement, right? Right now it's, hey, we need to get our businesses going. We need to get people attracted back, and we need to be more successful than ever. So the normal way people solve problems is this way. You design, build, deliver, and then you measure. And if you're Babe Ruth or better, you'll be right about half the time. What we've learned, and the fundamental secret sauce in our methodology is, if instead of this you say, hold it, we know who our audience is, what story are we living in with them? And then what behavior do we want them to exhibit? Well, we know we want them to do those 6 things. We want more to come. We want them to stay longer. We want them to spend more. We want them to tell their friends, all those things. Knowing that, we can say, all right, how do we change our story to design, produce, and deliver something that will get them to behave the way we want them to behave? And it's really a simple model, and it really works. So that's really why we like to start with story when we talk about experience design. Recent research, and these are just random verbatims I snagged from some research. You know, the audience is out there, and they want this storied experience. And you're beginning to also see some trends, and they're telegraphing. This comment here is really interesting. You know, that really now is not just about how long will the line be. That's also about safety. That's also about how many people am I sharing with in my space. So let's investigate a little deeply. Here's what we find the drivers to be. And some of this is research driven, honestly, and some of it's just anecdotal. It's based on what we've been seeing ourselves as we go out and work. Number 1, imagine this: guests need to feel safe. That is number 1. By the way, it's always been number 1. Safety, particularly for American travelers, Western travelers. Number 1 thing, I got to feel safe. What's really interesting is when we begin to pull a little deeper and we look at what that means. So that's why I call it perceived safety. I'll give you a case study. In a recent project, we asked people, hey, you know, what would make you feel safe? What would make it feel safe to you to come to this destination? And, you know, we're expecting to hear social distancing, masks, you know, a vaccine. Here's number 1. Number 1 was, I would like to make sure that I have access to a doctor who speaks English. Mask wearing, social distancing, in this case, we're pretty far down the list. So it's about, now I'm not suggesting you should be cagey about this and lie at all, but addressing the perceived safety of your audience is important. So as we look at experience design, what are we doing now, and how do we redesign that so that we're really embracing this notion of perceived safety more than clinical safety? Okay, together alone. Group size, cohort size, what's now called your bubble, those are shrinking. People do want to be together, but they only want to be together with people who are in their bubble. Now that bubble might be a family, it might be the group that's been hanging out together on a cruise ship, it might be a group traveling together, but a model that suggests mass attendance, hey, we make our money because we don't charge very much, but we put lots and lots of people together. Even after the next year or 2, that's still not going to be what we find is driving behavior. So how do we rethink the scale of the way we're delivering experience? How do we scale it so that we're addressing this need and we're changing the paradigm and we're giving you that chance to be together with people, but just with people that you feel good about being together with? Unobtainium. So here's the truth. About last, I don't know, December, maybe January, over 32% of the population of the world became Gen Z and millennial. So just keep that in mind, because that's where growth comes from over time. And that particular group, but also groups that travel more, particularly groups that are fly travelers and not first-time cruisers, are really much more interested right now in getting an impossible to get Instagram picture of being in an amazing place, doing an amazing thing that none of their friends get to do. They're way more interested in that and will frankly pay way more for that than they will for some of our traditional thoughts about, you know, pamper and hospitality. I don't need a massage. I don't need a 5-star hotel, but I want to be able to stand in this place and get this picture of me with that animal doing this incredible thing, because nobody else gets that. So what's your unobtainium? What do you have that you can deliver that might be something that can't be done anywhere else? Really worth thinking about. All right, the real thing. We had a recent experience with a destination marketing organization, and I won't say where, but the head marketer said, well, now don't say we need to be authentic. I hate that word, authenticity. I don't kind of care what you hate, it plays. So you know, the news here is reality programming isn't just for television. People really sign up for what's real. And boy, what great news for people who are in the destination tourism industry. You have an abundance of realness. So, you know, it's top of the list. So, you know, and my colleague, Mark, who's on the call with us, has a great story about hearing from a cruise company, actually. Yeah, you know what our best shore experience is? It's a leaky wooden fishing boat that only holds 6 people with a crusty fishing guide, and they're walking around on stinky bait all day, and they love it. That reality is driving market decision-making right now, way more, frankly, than some of the traditional ways we've thought about destinations. So, and here's the fun part. The data suggests, the research suggests, and our own anecdotal experience is, there is market price elasticity if you can deliver value. And what that translates as right now, people will pay more for safety, being able to be with the people they want to be with, and doing a real thing that's hard for other people to do. That's a premium. That's a premium offer. Doesn't require new capital. You don't have to pour any footers. You don't have to get a building permit. If you can wrap those 4 things up, honestly, right now our impression is you can probably charge more than you've been charging and more than you think you can charge.
And Bob,
Yeah.
the other thing is it makes the memory, and it's that takeaway, just like what you said, Mark experienced, you know, from a discussion with the cruise line about,
Yep.
you know, the boat. It's going back to your friends and family, and you always hear about, you know, you tell 10 people, they tell 1,000 more, but it's true. It's back to what's that memory you're taking away, you know, from there. And in most cases, it's about the people.
Absolutely. You know, you're so right, Larry. You know, and if you think about our own travel, when we come back from a location scout or work with a client in a destination, the first thing I tell somebody is some cool person I met, a waiter, a bartender, a cab driver, a guy, you know, a guide. Yeah, absolutely. So here's some actions to think about right now. Well, let's start with what stories are we telling? You know, and the idea is to really drill down into that and really look at your experience and kind of consciously investigate. All right, you know, what stories are we telling, and make them explicit. Now, you're probably telling a portfolio of different stories. The other side is, again, who are your best tellers? I did a workshop once for Adventures by Disney, which is their you know, upscale kind of adventure safari tourism brand. And they said, look, our guides know their stuff, but they kind of know their stuff. They present it academically, you know, and so we did a workshop, and basically I said, look, it's one thing to say, now over here is such and such a temple or such and such a church, and it was built by these people at this time. More fun is to say, yes, that's a great looking temple, but hold on a minute. I'm going to introduce you to somebody who's a real live magician, because there's some guy on the street who is a fantastic local character that guide knows about. Those are the take-homes. Those are the things people get on TripAdvisor and talk about on your behalf. So figure out what stories you're telling now, then flip it around, right? What stories could you tell? It might be time for a rewrite or a punch up, right? And I got to tell you, and I'm not the world traveler that many of you are, I have never yet met a destination that would ever exhaust its supply of extraordinary stories. There's thousands of them. So, you know, get that, you know, pick your poison, you know, get a decent bottle of local rum out, sit down at a table with your buddies and say, hey, what stories can we tell here? And take a look at those. All right. It's a really good time when you think about delivering your guest experience to loosen up, shake out the muscles and stay loose. A pandemic is not the only thing that drives change. So we would argue forever, you want to really hold tight to your sense of place, your distinction, your voice. Those are your crown jewels, but stay really open to new ways of delivering. You know, I had a boss once at Disneyland Entertainment whose famous quote was, "We never do the same thing once." I mean, his point was stay on your toes. I don't want you guys to do derivative stuff. So it's a good time to look at the way you deliver your experience. And if you're locked into certain kinds of systems of delivery, think about how you make those more flexible going forward. People who do international travel are people who do not, by the main, do it because they want to watch. They're not passive observers. They're not spectators. Yes, of course, there are some, but most people want to touch. And the bottom line here is if they can do it at home on their phone or see it at home on their phone or do it on their computer, don't offer it. You guys have the opportunity to offer something hands-on, hands dirty, come with me. And yes, you're going to climb some stairs and it's going to get hot and you're going to sweat. That's okay, because that's not what people can do at home. So enable this visceral, physical engagement. We did a project in Puerto Vallarta, outside of Puerto Vallarta once, and very upscale destination, very wealthy clients. And the most popular thing we tested was going out into the fields where they grew pineapples and mangoes and coconuts, harvesting them, carrying the harvest back to a kitchen, rolling up your sleeves, washing your hands, working with the chef to make your own meal. That was the winner. So think about it. How do we do more? And finally, and again, this plays well in your favor, hyper locality. Destination tourism is about only here can you insert thing here, right? So don't deliver derivatives, and this is, I'm going to say it, I don't want to offend anybody. This is particularly important in the Caribbean. Don't look and be like all the other places people could go that are kind of like you. Go find those things that are completely local, completely things that only you can do. I tell a story of myself. I was sailing once, coming into Eleuthera, and it's a little bit of a tricky entrance getting across the reef, particularly if you're coming down from Marsh Harbor. And I hadn't done it before, and I was in a particular place in my boat, and I got my binoculars out, and I looked across the reef, and I said to my boatmate, hey, maybe we ought to move. Those guys are over there. And he looked at me and said, how do you know they're not aground? So the point is, don't be derivative. You've got the goods, so make it hyper local, and that's going to drive value for your guest. Okay. Last lever, your brand. If we're religious about story, we're at least passionate about brands, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what a brand means, because it's not your island brand, it's not your tourism organization's brand, it's not your direct marketing office's brand. I'm talking about your brand. This little place right here, Island Roasters, that's my coffee place at the beach I go to in Florida. That's their brand. That's my favorite brand. And they are engaging people online, and they have a newsletter, and it's all about what they do with coffee and how they make their guests feel comfortable. So we want you to think third about, your brand. And by the way, as an advancer, your guest, your story, your experience, and your brand all interrelate to each other. They're all parts of the same whole. So these things aren't independent of each other. So best definition of brand I ever heard was from Jerry Garcia, who founded the Grateful Dead. He said, don't be the best at what you do, be the only one in the world who does what you do. And this is a guy who made a multi-million dollar franchise out of a band that, could barely tune their guitars, had a lot of trouble showing up on time, and fell down on stage a whole lot. So, this is really important stuff. And this is a great brand definition. Kind of our brand definition is your brand is the story that connects your reason for being with your guests' reasons for caring. It's not your logo. It's not your website. It's not any of those things. It is this. And if your brand is not doing this for you, it isn't working hard for you. Greatest example of brand in the world is Starbucks. Really good brands change behavior. Starbucks changed behavior. They turned the United States of America into a coffee culture. It never was before that. Coffee was a commodity. Still is. My argument about Starbucks is they were so good at branding and experience that they rent seats for an average of about $5, $6 an hour and give away free coffee, because that's really what they do. If you actually analyze how much you pay for a cup of coffee in Starbucks compared to what you can make one for at home, you'd never go there. That's not why you go. You go for the environment. They've recently proven this by going one step further. They've proven in the market that their brand is so strong, the notion of a Starbucks experience is so strong, a lot of their new stores aren't even going to have a place to sit, because people are really happy for the Starbucks opportunity to order online, just go and pick up their coffee and take it somewhere else. So you want to be a behavior altering brand for your guests. And here's the warning. If your brand and your experience aren't interrelated as experience for people, you become commoditized. You become like rice, or I used to say toilet paper, but right now that's pretty valuable. So you don't want to be commodified. So what's next, around destination branding? Well, one is tighter focus. It's a really good time to stay true to your focus. What we like to say is be really tall and not very wide. We want you to stick up out of the noise so people can really see you, but be distinctively purposed. And so you're out of the noise. You're out of the noise at your feet. I had a friend of mine once who started a company. It's called Mother Mary's Organic Beer. And I said, what are you doing? He said, I'm selling beer to Catholic health food enthusiasts. So tight focus on your audience. And I'll tell you this, and you know, I say it all the time, but something for everyone, that's the definition of a non-brand. Pick a place and go there. To that point, even more important, category of one means this: don't just stay in your lane, invent a brand new lane and then stay in it. But be out in the field by yourself saying, well, if you've never been there and done that, I don't care where else you've been, you got to go. That's the only place you can do that. It is time to engage your audience. And if you convince your audience that you actually care what they think, they'll talk to you. So the idea here is on dialogue is listen more. Give your guests, give your audience, give your partners even a way to talk to you and really listen to them. And make sure you give them a receipt that you're listening to them. We did a study once at Walt Disney World. We found out people hated our bus system, and it was pretty clunky. So we said, well, you know, we got to spend tens of millions. We got to build more monorails right away. And somebody went and said, well, let's go check. So we went back out to the survey world. Well, here's what we found out once we really listened. What the guests said was, yeah, we kind of hate your buses. They're clunky and they're clumsy. But you know, don't spend money on that. If you're going to spend money, put more characters in the park so our kids can get their autographs and get their pictures taken easier. Let me tell you how many characters you can put in the park for the price of a monorail. So this dialogue will not only help you know what to do, it'll help you get efficient about really putting your focus on where your brand needs to be positioned for that distinction. Okay, to the point we made earlier about how do we talk to our audience, you live in the age of trans-narrative. Your brand has to live everywhere. You can't live on advertising. You can't rely on your partner distribution channels. Like you can't say, well, don't worry, the cruise lines are already telling our story. You just can't. You have to own your narrative and you got to put it every place somebody might get it. So if you are not actively out there, you know, with a fresh, dynamic website, you know, a YouTube channel or two, a presence on at least the big three, you know, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, particularly Instagram with all the beauty we have in these locations, you need to, and now is the time to do it. Get it set up, get somebody focused on it. And the pro tip on social media marketing is diligence. You know, you want to use Twitter, you want it to work for you 4 times a day. So really, really look into that. Now's a good time. And by the way, you know, we're actually starting to look at, and I'll talk about this in a minute, other ways you can use the web right now to get engaged virtually. Finally, likeonomics is a huge brand issue right now. That phrase was actually coined in an article in Forbes magazine by a giant ad agency, but it's simple principle and it's been tested. People do not necessarily shop now based on price, and they certainly don't shop based on features and benefits. They shop based on how they feel about you. So if people like you, the market analyst said they'll spend money on you. And the number one way they know, they report that, well, why do you like them? And the number one answer is, oh, because I think they like me. And so imparting that notion of, hey, we really like you guys. You know, that's me and Southwest Airlines. You know, I like Southwest Airlines. They've convinced me they actually like me. I don't think they really know me, but they made me believe that. So if I ever fly again, which I will soon, it's going to be on Southwest. I will take an inconvenient, badly timed flight with 2 extra stops on Southwest rather than flying direct on a competing airline because I like Southwest. So think about that likeonomics component. So here's a few actions you can look at for your brand. Time to heat up the conversation. So here's the number one recommendation right now. It's topical. Make your COVID recognition statement if you must, but do it in the context of a vital, powerful, all about us, we're here. Not due to COVID-19, you know, we regret, you know, we don't send a we'll be back soon message. Send a we're hot, we're happening, we're here right now for you message, even if they can't come right now. Heat up that dialogue. We have a client who's got an attraction that's kind of animal based. It's not exactly a zoo, but it's animal based. And, you know, they had to close because they're in Miami. The first thing he did is, hey, Starting next week on Wednesday nights at 6, come to the Flamingo. And they go out in the Flamingo pen and put cameras out there and they do online stuff and everybody's sipping their own drink in their house and they're watching these goofy birds. That's what you want to do. Don't back up. Okay, hypercurrent. So it's be my last sermon on social media, but social media is the universal village campfire of the earth. If you're not at the campfire, nobody knows you live in the village. So stay hypercurrent on your stuff. If you need justification, 3.25 billion hours of video are watched a month on YouTube, not posted, watched. People are doing stuff, right? So here's one to think about, because we just started exploring this and we've gotten pretty excited about new product around this. Virtual travel is hot. Travel Channel's ratings are off the chart because, again, I can't go, but at least I can watch pretty places on TV. Well, you could create not only demand for your destination, but maybe even an interim revenue stream by simply putting a really cool virtual way, not slideshows and Zoom, but come cruise around our island and click on stuff and find out great things and hear great stories and lore from great storytellers. That's product, but it's also promotional. So you really want to do that and you want to keep your brand current. Okay, maybe time to put on a new outfit. Your brand is not your logo, but it might be a good idea to take a look at that. And in our world, before you start talking about your visual identity or what we call a sensory identity, you want to start with your constitution. So what do we believe? What do we want people to say? What do we want people to feel? What are we going to promise? What do we do every day? Figure those questions out, answer those questions, and then you can look at it and say, well, if those are the answers, what should we look like? Then you can actually think about the way you present your face to the world with your graphics and your logo and your online identity and even the way you train your people to deliver your experience, which is my next piece. When we do brand activation, you can do everything you want online. You can do pop-ups in airports. You can do all kinds of interesting, engagement marketing. Nothing is as powerful as training the people who will talk to your guests how they can live your brand. It's not nearly as sexy sounding, but it is the most powerful thing you can do. It's the longest lever you can pull to reinforce and maintain that brand distinction that's going to make you a bunch of money. And finally, as I mentioned, don't be something for everybody. Speak with clarity, right? The way you activate your brand is by being selective. And if you've never been there, it'd be really good for you to go to the Austin, Texas website. Austin's cut line is keep Austin weird. So it's very clear. If you're looking for kind of a B-flat beige, middle American kind of comfy place to hang out, don't go to Austin. It's weird. It's full of weird reprobate guitar players, most of whom I used to work with. So you want that clarity and you want to really not be afraid to focus on a somebody when you're out there speaking. All right. So let's wind this sermon up. It is, in our view, important that you not do this in a scattergun kind of way. So however you might approach these things, and I hope you'll try some, do it methodologically, do it with some discipline. We have a method. This page is really the way we do it. We start by understanding how are things right now. We have a process for that. Then we have a really interesting way of developing a narrative about, well, here's how things should be. And then that becomes the design story that I mentioned before. And then from that, you make, we call it an experience design plan. It's actually a blueprint or a playbook that says, here's the way we design, build, and execute. And then you can go to the market and test that and fine tune it. Then you build it and you put it in place, then you train it. And then finally you take that out to the marketplace with your really robust brand and your tools. And we think that's a really good formula for being really ready to roar back into the market. So summary of summaries here is, it is a time when unique and authentic stories, I think, are very, very strong assets in destination entertainment and destination leisure. Great fun destinations are full of them. So that's good news. If you're going to make that work, you need to amplify those things with a really well-fed, well-nourished, well-structured and distinctive brand. Don't look like anybody else, even your close friends. Doesn't mean you can't partner with people, but partner with people who are different from you. Pardon me. You know, travel and the things we do with our leisure time are very personal because it's the most important thing we have. So personal transmedia immersion is important. How do you stay personally related to guests so that they get to the point where they're corresponding with you, they're engaging with you, and you want them to think of you as, well, that's the place, that's my place, that's where I go. That's important. Flex and scalability, particularly in the next near term, we're all going to have to figure out how do we make things work at different levels of mass, right? It needs to work with a few guests and it needs to work with a whole bunch of guests. And both of those present interesting conundrums. You know, how do I make money if I've got skinny attendance? And how do I keep it safe and good and valuable and keep my brand alive if I've got a lot of attendance because I've got this safety issue? So you want to think about staying flexible. You want the audience to own you, as I mentioned, and then, you know, for the long haul, because remember, there's always going to be a next. The next after this and the next after that means don't get too anchored. You want to really keep yourselves positioned to be perpetually fresh, you know, as you go forward. So there is a pot of gold there, I think, at the end of this rainbow. But in order to get the gold, you have to get to the rainbow. So I get it. Everything I've talked about, and I'm sure a lot of you are sitting there, rightfully so, saying, yeah, but, you know, gee, times are tough. That all takes money and effort. It does. What I would ask you is, what's the cost of not doing it? What's the cost of trying to ride out the storm and change nothing and really not be in a position to get up on your hind legs and rock and roll when things are back? And I think if you really look at the value equation, you know, it's there. This is really, really money that returns on equity. So final point, particularly for those of you who are Caribbean based, believe me, every one of you has way more going on than palm trees, sand, rum drinks, and the best hair braiders in the world. Let's go look at that. Of course, you get to have all this stuff too, but everybody has this. Every one of you has extraordinarily distinctive stories to tell. And we'd love to see you out there in the market telling those, because we're pretty convinced that's how you're going to win. Larry, Tom, I'm kind of done haranguing the troops. So here for questions if anybody has any.
Fantastic. Thanks, Bob. Appreciate it. Very, very valuable. I'm going to start up a quick poll for everybody to please provide us some feedback. And I know Tom's got a few questions for you.
I'm going to go ahead and jump right into it. This one says, hi, Bob. Can you please touch on how best to deal with telling the story when you have multiple brands, multiple attractions, and service offerings? And this is from Dennis.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. So it's an hour-long answer, but I'll give you the 2-minute version or the 30-second version. I think segmentation is the key. So if I have a portfolio of brands, I think my argument would be, take a look at the stuff we talked about. Who goes with which brand, and what story do we tell to those people about that brand that's going to be potent? And that's the short answer. So you have to match the brand with the audience and remember who your guests are, and tailor your brand messaging around those guests.
Mm-hmm. Okay. This one is from Jared. Hi, Bob. What's the best way to marry my company story and brand with the pre-established brand of the destination? How do I find where my brand lives in this larger story?
That's a great question. I think the answer is, first of all, get yours nailed down, and then start with, does the destination brand actually have a story, and is it being told? If it is, what is it? My other advice is, I'd be a little selfish. I would call it a one-way. It should be a one-way street right now. What parts of that overarching destination brand amplify my story, and how do I cooperatively leverage that? Don't worry about the rest of it. Go find the parts that help you and leverage those.
This one's from Anki. Thanks, Bob, for confirming the importance of unique and authentic storytelling. And again, to look at how can you make your existing product better. So that's just an appreciation there. This was a little bit challenging. I don't know if you want to jump on it or not. This is from Travis, and you might want to scale it back a little bit. Good afternoon. It would be interesting to have Bob contrast 6 ideas pre and post pandemic.
Yeah, we don't have time. We don't, and it would be interesting, and it's a good idea. And you know what? Maybe we should take one of these sessions and do that. That'd be a blast.
There you go.
But it would be. It's a great question and a really good exercise because there's a lot of I think hidden value in figuring what's different.
And then one last one from Kelly. Hey Bob, how can I best marry my company story, which is most important to me, with that of the broader destination story?
Yeah, I think that's similar to the other question about the brand. It's, again, I would say find places where the Venn diagram overlaps nicely and just work on those spots and use it to your advantage.
And then one last question, which actually is similar to the one I had jotted down as well. This is from Donna. Thanks, Bob, for all the great information. Do you have any suggestions when using social media? How much of your content should be promotional? How much curated? You mentioned social media a lot. And I guess my follow-on question to that would be, how do you, if you don't have kind of a structured, strategic plan for social media, where's a good place to start?
Yeah, that's a really important question. And you can get 1,000 answers and they'll all be different. I'll tell you what we, not just what we think, what we're actually doing in our own company, because we're restructuring our social media right now. Here's the learning. Each social media channel has a different set of rules to it and a different set of things that it's really good at. So the first thing to do is to kind of author a strategy document for your organization that says, okay, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TripAdvisor, LinkedIn, wherever YouTube, wherever you're going to go be. Here's what it is. Here's what we think it does well. So here's how we're going to use it. And here's who in our organization is responsible for that part. So that's the way you set up the framework, I think. Mm-hmm. The other side is to kind of segment and say, and there are a couple of sort of overarching rules. Twitter is short, brief, and Twitter doesn't matter unless you're using it to poke engagement. So Twitter is about not putting videos up, not putting a lot of photos up. It's not all product-y. It's quippy, snarky, interesting, entertaining, things that provoke people to respond to you. So that's kind of Twitter. Project updates, things about stuff that's happening, newsy things, that's great for Facebook. It's long form, works really good if you post a photo or a video with it, etc. Instagram's about being beautiful. Instagram's not just about the photo you post, and it's not even at all about the caption for the photo. It's about 12 photographs that when I look at them in gallery mode, all look gorgeous together. So, and that's real high level. YouTube, that's your own private free television network. So, and as you guys all know, YouTube is a legit network now. So you can put medium and long form programming up there. Put a great documentary up there about your destination, more about people who go there and have a great time. And that's short and sweet. There's a lot more, but I think the idea is, again, use each platform for what it's really, really good at.
Well, that's really excellent. It seems like it's probably something, social media is something we should probably do a full webinar on. There's so much information out there on it. Sure that's all the questions we probably have time for. I know we've gone over. Thank you everyone for hanging in there through the Q&A, and I'll turn it back over to you, Larry.
Super, thanks. Bob, many thanks for joining us today. It was a great, great dialogue and great information shared, and we look forward to getting the webinar uploaded on our website and getting it out to the folks as well. And we will be getting the PowerPoint presentation from Bob, and we'll send that out to everybody as well. So again, Bob, thanks so much.
My pleasure, guys. I really, really appreciate you letting me do this. This is a lot of fun.
You twisted my arm. No, just kidding. No.
Checks in the mail.
Listeners, for all the listeners today, we will not be having a normal webinar next Wednesday because I'm going on vacation. That's the real reason. Yeah, I'm leaving Orlando and headed to the beach, but I will be in confined space.
You wild man, you.
We'll reconsume on July 22nd at 2 p.m. and it's ideation focused with Lee Kitchen. Please visit our website at www.destinationstogether.com to register for this webinar. As always, we will be sending out a reminder, and if you follow us on social media, you will find links to sign up for all the future webinars there as well. Please don't hesitate to share our websites with others and all the webinars we're doing. We appreciate it. Many thanks to everybody for joining us today. Be strong, be safe, be healthy. Bob, thanks again. Tom?
Thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. It was awesome. The session was amazing. Everyone out there listening, please send us a photo of your destination, something that you love about your destination. Again, thank you everyone for being here. Stay safe, stay healthy.